have a very special conversation on this show today. My colleague Sumita Kareer actually spoke to the pace of electricity mobility in India, how has that accelerated, and she interacted with three managements here today. We have Ravneet Mann, Policy and Strategy Head at Stride Ventures, Anmol Singh Jaggi, co-founder and CEO at BluSmart Mobility, as well as Vikas Mishra, the founder and CEO at Moeving, who spoke about the pace of accelerated mobility that is in the country, how that is moving forward as well. Let's go across and listen into the conversation.
So Stride is the largest startup financing platform in the country. We're able to do that by virtue of Stride Ventures on balance sheet and Stride One, which is our NBFC off balance sheet. And in fact, you see two of our stellar portfolio companies right here, and we're very committed to investments in the EV space. Stride is trying to make an impact through its investments, not just for the startups, but for the entire ecosystem and for the planet as a whole. Vis-a-vis EVs, we've got a huge exposure. We've got Moeving, which is the largest electric fleet operator in the commercial vehicle space. You've got BluSmart. I think BluSmart needs no introduction as well. We are also invested in Loham, which is a large battery recycler, in Oben Electric, a two-wheeler OEM with e-bikes that they're making battery smart into the battery swapping space. So from the perspective of a fund, I feel we're really trying to ensure adequate presence across the entire EV value chain. We've taken an exposure of about 300 crores through these companies in the last couple of years, and but our ambitions are immense, are huge. We're also through Stride One looking at going into EV financing, last mile EV financing, and through that as well as direct debt to our portfolio companies, I'm looking at about 100 million in the next 12 months.
So debt financing, that's a very, very relevant part of the overall EV ecosystem, the transition to electric mobility. And I'm going to come that to you in just a little while from now. But you mentioned that, you're only going to grow. You're very ambitious. Stride Ventures is very ambitious as far as this segment is concerned. Do you want to quantify that, or is it too early?
I mean, I just said I'm looking at 100 million in the next 12 months, and it's a tall order, but I think it is something that is an adequate need of the hour for our country vis-a-vis EV adoption, and whatever role we can play to electrify, whether it is passenger mobility or last mile delivery, we're going to be present across the value chain.
Now let me come to you, Vikas. Vikas, so you're into last mile delivery. You want to transform the e-logistics space. And correct me if I'm wrong, when you started, the idea came after you saw a spurt in the e-commerce ecosystem, which grew post the pandemic by 3x. Tell us about your startup as well and the kind of expansion plans that you have, and how are you really transforming the space?
You're absolutely right. The idea of this whole moving was conceptualized during the COVID days, when people started ordering from home a lot more than they were doing before. We have, in the last 3 years of existence, we have deployed about 2,000 plus electric vehicles across 16 plus cities in India. We are in the B2B space, so we serve about 40 plus customers, and we have about 30 charging hubs that enable the operations. We want to be the largest electric mobility player in the commercial EV space. The market in India is about 6 million vehicles that's being used currently for last mile delivery space, right, in three-wheeler cargo at the four-wheeler LCV segment. We feel that 1.5 million, 25% of that can be electrified to organized fleet operator like us, and we want to own that 33% market share. So in this decade itself, we would like to deploy 50,000 vehicles and electrify the entire delivery space in the country. But we don't want to focus only on the e-commerce space. E-commerce is good. They have been leading this space in terms of EV adoption, the likes of Flipkart and Amazon. But we feel that e-commerce is only 6% of the total market of the shipment delivery. 94% of the shipment happens to normal retail channel. And that's why we want to introduce EV to multiple segments as well. For example, we were the first one to introduce EV to the paint segment. We are the first one to onboard the largest lubricants company. Right. We were the first one to onboard the footwear company. So we want to introduce EV to the multiple segments and ensure that 100% EV-based delivery happens in this decade itself.
100% you said.
Yes.
Of the deliveries happen in this decade itself. Anmol, now I'm going to come to you. Gensol actually, has been gaining a lot of traction. It's one of the most attractive mid-caps, but BluSmart in itself has been gaining a lot of positive news also. There's a lot of interest around this startup. Tell us how you really started it, what's been the growth, path till now. And, we're also, in the World Cup season, in the festive season. What's been the demand growth like?
Super. So from a BluSmart perspective, we started 2019, right before COVID, and we started with about 70 cars. The whole idea was that the ride-hail ecosystem in the country was not as per customer expectations. People were finding cancellations, huge surge price, and at the end, we were also thinking at our end that why don't we try to make the ride-hail business more profitable by going all electric. So our motive of going electric was profitability, because unit economics on electric vehicles is much superior. But for the customer, the proposition was clean cabs, no cancellations, no surge pricing. So that was our customer proposition, and God has been kind. Despite COVID, we have been able to grow substantially. As we speak, we have north of 5,000 cars operating on the road. We are adding about 500 cars every month to the platform. So growth is coming in good. More than the growth, what I'm exceptionally proud of is the customer love that we keep receiving. We've been a 4.9 star rated app right from day one of our inception. Extremely happy that customers love the brand, and that actually helps us also because it brings down the marketing cost to close to zero. So BluSmart, of course, is becoming the choice of ride hail between wherever we operate, which is basically Delhi, NCR, and Bangalore. Hopefully we'll expand to other cities soon, but the whole idea is to go deeper and deeper in Delhi, NCR, and Bangalore. Delhi, NCR, and Bangalore potentially is a market for about close to 150,000 vehicles. At least in the next 1 year, we'd like to deploy another 12,000 new vehicles. So taking our fleet to north of 16,000 in the next about 365 days.
I want to get a word from all three of you on what you really make of India's targets of electrification, state-specific, Delhi-specific, and of course, from a centre's perspective, central government's point of view. Are those targets really realistic, and what can be done in order to sort of reach those targets or somewhere close to that?
So at least on the Delhi EV aggregator policy, which is there, I think it's reasonable to expect, and it's not something which is outrageously going to punish anybody to say you have to adopt EV. So it's good, it's genuine, it is favorable for the industry. It's also favorable for the citizens, because citizens, of course, deserve a much better life. I think could it have been slightly more ambitious? It could have been. It would have pushed everybody else. Considering we are 100% electric, we are fully in compliance.
Do you want to mention, when you say that it could have been more ambitious, do you want to give us some numbers in terms of, when you say that?
So I think right now the adoption is more like 5% incremental every year. I'm sure that could have been enhanced quite a lot.
Ravneet, what do you?
I think while Anmol mentions a good point, but speaking from a policy perspective, it's important to take the entire ecosystem together. And I know that there have been a couple of formulations, and they've done adequate industry stakeholder consultations to ensure that compliance and adoption is there instead of mandating. And from that perspective, I think the policy is definitely a step in the right direction. And I think what Delhi has done should be, probably implemented nationwide in terms of identifying roadmaps. So if we have a 2030 target of, 80%, 70%, 30%, EV adoption across different form factors, what does that number look like in 2028 and 2027? And how, is it really being accelerated towards the fag end instead of having a, very static, linear addition over a period of time? I think that's definitely important from a policy perspective. I think another thing that's really interesting that the government is really doing now is they're listening and they're committed. And I think that's really relevant, and that gives a huge boost of confidence for players such as us, because being a fund, when I do deploy investments into a certain category or a sector, we're looking at where it's headed over a period of time and how much policy stability and boost am I looking at that particular sector.
And you feel that there is policy
stability?
Yes, so
definitely,
now.
And that has helped us double down our appetite, and increase our exposure to these companies. And then Of course, bringing in portfolio effects at play. So while the government is doing its part, what am I doing from the private sector perspective? For example, I got these two gentlemen on the same table to have a conversation, and I'm like, you've got Blue Charge, you've got vehicles, can we leverage synergies across the two, right? And can I do that with other players? So Loham is recycling batteries. We're figuring out if Moeving can possibly look at assured buybacks at the end of life for the batteries. So there's definitely a lot of avenues at play. It's about creativity, and it's about having that commitment and that gumption that you're really going to go the whole hog.
Right, so she mentions this very interesting point about private-public partnerships that are also happening in the space of finance and otherwise in the area of logistics, battery, etc. What do you make of where we stand as a nation currently on EV, and are the targets really by 2030, are those targets realistic?
From a government point of view, I think central government has laid out about $7 billion if you combine FAME to PLI scheme and all. I think that's a huge commitment from the central government. On top of that, 16 states out of 31 states have committed to a EV policy, and Delhi government has been leading this statewide initiative. The target was about 25% by 2024. They are about 11%, achieved that 11%. I think this aggregator policy will help in terms of increase adoption in four-wheeler segment. I think that's missing. I feel that the pace of adoption in Delhi can increase in the four-wheeler segment a lot more than the pace that is happening now. Now, coming on the partnership on the public-private side, we are very much engaged with all the central governments and the state governments and giving our view in any policy requirements. But in terms of even partnership, in terms of what charging infra is required for government to build, and we will be able to utilize that. That's a huge improvement that we can help in terms of increasing the utilization of charging infra that government has already spent. In terms of partnership, we feel that if the right product comes from the OEM, that will really help the adoption, and we have seen that in the three-wheeler space. When Piaggio came with a product, it helped in terms of adoption. Mahindra came with a product, it helped in the adoption. Bajaj is now coming up with that. In four-wheeler space, Tata has been leading this initiative, both in the commercial space and the passenger mobility space. We feel that more and more OEM come with a product, and we are working very closely with the likes of Tata's and Ashok Leyland in terms of giving our perspective on the use case and what is the right kind of product to be built. So that once they deploy those vehicles with us, they are already giving the market fit and right use case approach while deploying the vehicles. So that strategic partnership that we have with Tata and Ashok Leyland is helping to develop the right product for this commercial space.
Right, Anmol, I want to bring you in here on the issue of subsidies. We were talking about, government schemes as FAME subsidy. There was also PLI, scheme as well that the government has floated. FAME now in its second year, but there was a little bit of controversy earlier this year over, cutting the subsidy, also on the utilization of subsidy. But I want to understand how have brands, and you've been having conversations with other players in the ecosystem as well, how have subsidies really helped players? And secondly, is this really sustainable to depend on subsidies? Because, the conversation a couple of months back was that subsidy support is essential. It's crucial and critical for some startups.
So we've been a beneficiary of the subsidies which have been provided. Yes. On an average car that we have, we get about 2.5 lakh rupee per car as subsidy. I multiply it by about 5,000 cars that we have. It's a substantial amount of money, that about 15 odd crore rupees of subsidy that we have received as part of the subsidy coming to us. Which is substantial, which has helped us in making our unit economics better. But also you would understand that I come from a renewable energy background where we also saw a huge amount of subsidies, and then we saw the waning off of subsidies. No sector in the world should continue to be dependent on subsidies and start standing on its own feet. We also believe that it's only a matter of time when electric mobility can also stand on its own feet.
But what should be that time period?
Sure.
For example,
so if you look at the last quarter in itself, we have seen lithium-ion prices, battery prices fall from north of $200 to about $100, $110 right now, which is like a more than 30-40% reduction which has happened. If this reduction is not momentary in nature and can continue, and battery prices can be sub $100 for a little longer period of time or forever, I'd actually think there is no need for any subsidy to come in to the sector. There might be PLI which is needed, because PLI is to enhance manufacturing in the country, which is extremely important. On the manufacturing side, we are doing poor. on the adoption side, if the battery prices are near $100, it actually does not mean that we need any subsidy.
It does not mean that we need any subsidy. What do you have to say on how soon should the subsidies be tapered off, or how much time before subsidies are actually tapered off, as has happened in countries like China, for instance? Yeah. They've taken almost a decade or so.
Correct. There's a benchmark in terms of EV adoption. After that, it auto accelerates the EV adoption. I think that 10% is the critical junction where EV adoption crosses 10% on a pan-India level. I think that's where the auto explosion will happen in the EV sector, and that's the right point to kind of wane off the subsidy. That is what internal we can think of, but from external perspective, lithium-ion cell price is very important. The cost of battery itself is about 40 to 50% of the total vehicle price, and if we can reduce the price from $200 per kilowatt hour to what Bloomberg predicts to about $72 per kilowatt hour by 2025, that's a huge reduction in the lithium cell on pricing. And that will make, at the cost level itself, the price parity between the ICE vehicle and the EV vehicle can happen if the lithium-ion cell price reaches to $70 per kilowatt hour. If the price parity happens between the ICE vehicle and the EV vehicle, operating cost of electric vehicle is anyway 80% cheaper. Then it becomes a natural adoption, and you don't need any subsidy to any convincing required for moving towards EV. It will be a natural course to reduce the cost and reduce the carbon emissions for a country like India.
All right, Ravneet, let me also get you in here on the issue of financing. Easy financing, various financing options has really sort of catapulted the smartphone industry, and we've seen that the premiumization trend across sectors, that's primarily been on the back of easy financing options. What can the EV industry do, and how are corporations like yourselves, sort of helping the adoption of EVs as far as financing is concerned? Because from NBFCs and of course, traditional banks, etc., the cost of loans in itself is very high.
I'll just, going back to what they were just discussing in terms of subsidies, I think there's now so much advancement from a technological perspective that will hopefully bring in those reductions in the costs.
Yes.
And when those cost efficiencies kick in, those economies of scale are really going to take off. And when that really happens, adoption is definitely going to happen. But for it to really pan out over a period of time, of course, you need innovative financing solutions, and that's where we really come in. I think innovative from the perspective of what we were just talking about, public-private, both need to come together. Right. So it needs to be a hybrid approach. You need blended finance where, there is an adequate support from entities, MFIs that can come in and provide that level of junior capital that really needs to provide that level of FLDGs that you can really look at, for investors such as us to come in. But once I have that commitment from, those, the junior debt that we can look at, then it really makes it easy for a private investor to come in and provide coverage from both perspectives. And
right.
Here is what I would like to say where Stride comes in from an equity-debt perspective. We have taken equity exposures within this, within this space for some companies. We are providing debt. We are helping, our portfolio companies identify best use cases for that debt to get the biggest bang for the buck. And if you look at it from the perspective of extrapolating financing available for last mile usage, so the driver who's going to be driving the BluSmart or who's going to be driving a moving vehicle at the end of the day, enabling them, can we bring about further impact in terms of, DEI, inclusion as well. And that's where, Stride One is really coming in and trying to provide EV financing as well. And I think that is a really crucial element to enable adoption, because you need to be able to provide that financing at much more competitive prices than right now, because it is not an apples to apples comparison. You cannot compare the price of an ICE vehicle to an EV, and therefore to be able to make it more attractive, you need to have much lower rates, you need to have much more patient capital, and you need to have innovative structures, and Stride is committed to that.
Right, and it has to be a customized financing model. Why don't you comment on this?
So we have been very lucky to have our vehicles financed, both on equity and debt. I think God has been kind and investors have been very kind. We've been able to raise sufficient amount of capital whenever it was required. On the debt side particularly, we have been very lucky to have been working with large Government of India institutions. So our first large debt came from IREDA, which was a 260 crore debt. Then we got Power Finance Corporation to do 630 crores. So it's been almost close to 900 crores of financing that we received, debt financing that we received from these two large financial institutions, both Government of India owned. And somebody would actually believe that they would be the last people to finance, but they were the first ones. Apart from that, regular banks like HDFC, Axis, ICICI, all of them have given us between 50 crores and 100 crores of asset financing, which is there. I think in today's world, if anybody wishes to say that if they have a bankable kind of a project which is not losing too much money, I don't think EV financing is becoming a constraint. Even on the cost of it, it's become very reasonable. To put it in perspective, both the IREDA debt and the PFC debt is sub 10% with good repayment terms which are there. So considering all of that, I think if the business model is bankable, there is enough credit which is available in the market. And of course, Stride Ventures has been a big partner. I think Stride Ventures perhaps was the first lender to BluSmart. The first lender I think we were just out of COVID and when Stride Ventures lent to us. So they were the first venture. So we also need venture debt players who can take that call before very large institutions can come in. And that's where I think Stride puts in kind of comes in very nicely.
Right, and what has worked for you, and which model really works better for
See,
the
if we have to deploy 50,000 vehicles in this decade, I don't think that we alone can own all the assets and deploy them. We are focusing on unorganized players who are small fleet operators currently. How do they make switch to EV? Exactly. And that's where the help that support we are getting from Stride One. How do we help in terms of financing those players to make the switch to EV? Because ultimately you just can't replace the entire ecosystem by only getting the new vehicles by the new players. So we have started that program, and I think with the EV financing that is being set up through Stride One will be a great help in enabling those people who are currently using ICE vehicle as small fleet operators, and they make the switch to EV.
Right. I think on the challenges front, I would also like to talk about the cost of ownership. I think there's a lot of conversation going around reducing the cost of ownership of an EV also, but also on the battery side of things. I think there is an increasing clarion call for standardization. Can standardization happen right now? There's also a concern related to range anxiety. I mean, if a new technology is coming, I always have it in my mind, okay, how far will it go? Can I go out station with this? And of course, that is directly proportional to the kind of infrastructure that you have. Who'd like to take that question first?
So on the battery standardization front, you have a very different views from different players. But our view is that if you can use one mobile phone with multiple SIM cards, yes, and whether it's a Airtel or Jio or anyone else, you don't change your mobile phone. So battery standardization is a good thing, that if same vehicle can have a battery, especially in the two-wheeler and three-wheeler space, when you are using the battery swappable battery, then you can go to any swapping station and go and replace your battery. Like the way you fill your petrol, you don't go to different petrol pump for different kind of OEM make vehicles. So I'm all up for standardization. It will really reduce the capex involved in the setting up the battery swapping centers, and it will help consumer more effectively do the swap at any of the swapping stations possible.
Right. Anmol, do you want to weigh in on this?
Yeah, I think on the battery standardization, while standardization is great, it also hinders innovation. We are at the stage of market where we still don't know which technology is going to win. Even lithium could get disrupted. So maybe in the next 5 years, it's solid state batteries which come and take up the position. So I would say it's slightly early to standardize because you do not know who the winner is. Coming technically on it, people believe LFP should be, lithium iron phosphate should be the standard, but there is now 50% of China is moving to what is called lithium magnesium iron phosphate. Now the world is changing really too fast for any particular technology to become the winner. Let more stability happen in the technology curve, and then maybe you go ahead and standardize it. So I would still say that standardization is great for one part, but standardization, the corollary of the hindering corollary is you lack innovation, gets stifled. And in a place where a lot of innovation is still to be done, I think we should leave the space open for a lot of new chemistries, form factors, battery types, etc. to come in. Maybe 3-4 years hence, we should start standardizing. Maybe that's the contrarian view, but I really want more innovation to come into the marketplace.
What are the kind of targets that you have? What's next for your company? You said that you're currently operating in Delhi and Bangalore, but there's a whole lot of space to be captured, a whole lot of customers to be apprised about. So what's next for your company? What are we going to see in the next couple of months from BluSmart?
Oh, you're going to see a boring BluSmart just running in Delhi and Bangalore. Like you mentioned, we are going to only keep increasing our presence in these two cities. There's a lot to be done here. Delhi and Bangalore contribute to 45% of Indian ride-hail market, so it's a huge market by itself. A lot of paying customers, lot of network effects that are still to come in for us over here. So you would see us only next 2-3 months. I think even in the next 6-8 months, you will only see us be present in these two cities, which is Delhi and Bangalore, Delhi NCR and Bangalore.
Delhi NCR and
But
Bangalore.
I think boring is good because it's predictability and that's what your customer wants.
Right. And I think the no cancellation policy is excellent, especially what I think we all have faced in the past couple of years.
Just stick to basics, no cancellation, no surge, no emissions.
And with that, it's a wrap on this edition of Startup Central as well as this week's edition on Startup Central on ET Now. It's a goodbye from myself as well as the team who put this show together. Remember, you can always write to us on suc@etnow.tv. Catch us at the same time next week.